everybody. Welcome to Brookline Interactive Group cable TV show award-winning The Safety Net. The Safety Net is dedicated to educating and reflecting upon domestic violence. October has been designated as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And to kick off our shows, we are super fortunate to have District Attorney Morrissey, along with of Norfolk County, along with his staff, Lisa Beatty, Chief of the Family Violence Special Victims Unit for Norfolk District Attorney, Jennifer Donelin, Supervisor District Court Victim Witness Advocates. I'm not sure she's making it on because there are problems with Wi-Fi. And Silvia Galdamez, Victim Witness Advocates. District Attorney Morrissey has been District Attorney, became District Attorney in 2010 after serving in the legislature. He chaired 4 major committees and he was chair of the Public Safety Committee. He was an early supporter and voted for the original Victims Bill of Rights bill, and he was one of the first to recognize the battered women's defense. He was also on the board of directors of Dove. Lisa Beatty, she currently prosecutes homicide, child abuse, sexual assault, and domestic violence cases in Norfolk County. She graduated from the Northeastern University School of Law. She was a victim witness advocate in the domestic violence unit from 1994 to 1997. Jennifer Donelin was supervisor of District Court Victim Witness Advocates. She graduated Suffolk University and she started at the Norfolk DA's office in 2013. In 2016, she became the supervisor of the DC Victim Witness Advocates. Silvia Galdamez, and I hope I'm pronouncing that, graduated Pine Manor College here in Brookline, and she was hired as a victim witness advocate in 2019. She served in the Quincy Court, and she is currently in the Brookline Court. Good, and Jennifer just joined.
Awesome.
I don't have a, oh good. I didn't have a picture until now. District Attorney Morrissey. Thank you so much. I know you're really, really busy. I was wondering if you could talk for a minute about your office in addressing domestic violence in our communities.
Sure.
Your vision.
Well, let me just say that the office has about 130 people, and Lisa runs the family violence portion of the office. We see over 20,000 cases a year. We do pay a lot of attention. Those are not all domestic violence cases. Those are, potential criminal cases, investigations. We don't see a lot of homicides, anywhere between 6 and 12 a year, usually people who know each other. But we do, because of the nature of the county, its geographic interests and how people look at different types of crime, we put a very heavy emphasis on educating people about domestic violence and making sure people who find themselves in a very tragic, difficult situation can get help and attention. And I was fortunate that I inherited a pretty substantial model over the years from years ago from Bill Delahunt and Bill Keating. And someone like Lisa has been here, since the 90s. She doesn't look that old, but she'll kill me later. So Lisa started as an advocate. I think that gave her a different touch. Now she's obviously one of the top attorneys in the office. She more recently trying a very, very difficult domestic violence homicide case that occurred during the pandemic. She's heavily involved, and I won't get into it because it's an open case, but Lisa handles those types of complicated cases and yet also works hand in hand with the various people in the office. We have, we spend a lot of time, we're victim oriented, no matter what the crime is, and especially with domestic violence. We spend a lot of time trying to get people, if they come into the court and you want a civil restraining order, even though that's really, with the criminal side, we do actually help, and we try to offer help and assistance, and we try to make sure we can get people pushing for the right direction. So maybe to a Dove or a Jane Doe or someone of our outside partners that we work hand in hand with. And we just want to make sure that people are very comfortable and safe. That the biggest thing is, what can we do to help you out? Get people like you, get your legal counsel. And you've been involved in all sorts of cases. So that's the primary thing we do. We're a resource. And then, we also, I pointed out, and I think because you do some probate work, is that we also have, we're the only county, I think, in the Commonwealth that has a person in the probate court, because a lot goes on during a very difficult breakup of a marriage that God knows what happens, and that's still into the court. So we have people there. But So you have the civil side, and I know that Sylvia and Jen are going to talk a little bit about that, because getting a restraining order during COVID is an issue we should talk about. But also, after you get your restraining order and you violate the restraining order, then you really put it into the bailiwick of the district attorney. That becomes the criminal matter. And we see those cases too, sorry to say. And that also has presented some unique challenges, because some people who have done some bad things, and especially during COVID, where the batterer knows where the victim is located, and the service has been a little bit more shaky, and people now trying to get out of the prisons who probably should have been locked up is dangerous, and it's put a lot of pressure on the system. And
DA Morrissey, you also work very closely with the Brookline police and the courts and probation and the sheriff's office. There's a chain that leads to your office, am I correct? A cooperative chain.
I would tell you that Brookline, first of all, Brookline, and we joke about it, you don't touch Norfolk County, but you're an integral part of the county, but you have your own community court. You're a one-horse show. And I think that really bodes well for us, and it bodes well for you as residents of the community. But more importantly, what I find kind of unique about Brookline is the commitment of the people and the police department for the resources they need. And you start talking about, I think you're the only police department that I know that has full-time domestic violence advocates attached to the police department. Now, people talk about that all the time, and this is something we should be doing. And now mental health, we do have some departments who have some mental health counselors, and Brookline has always been a leader and has not been afraid to spend money for resources to keep people safe. So I think that makes my job easier. I think Sylvia will tell you when working with Brookline, I think she enjoys a very close relationship with the people who provide the services at Brookline, and that's something we can talk about a little later in the show. But
I'm going to switch to, and not to interrupt, switch to Sylvia now. Sylvia, may I ask you a question?
Of course.
What happens when a victim, what does a victim encounter when coming into court looking for a restraining order in Brookline?
So in Brookline, it can be a little different than other courts, but in Brookline, the clerk's office are ready to give my direct line. If I'm not in the office, they're ready to give a phone number for a victim before applying for a restraining order. With COVID and the procedures that are now in place, if the victim does come into the courthouse, we are able to bring out the paperwork for them to file outside the courthouse. We have chairs, we have clipboards, we have pens ready for them to take their time and not to feel rushed, even with the pandemic going on. Also, if they don't want to come into the courthouse because of the pandemic, mass.gov has the PDF files for these applications, and they are user friendly. They're very, you can fill them out on the computer, on your phone, and then just print them out and email them back to the clerk's office.
Sylvia, have the number of people looking for restraining orders, and I don't need an exact number, has it increased during COVID? Has it decreased? Has it stayed the same? Have you seen a change due to COVID?
I want to say there has been a change, a little more, but not exactly a great peak of it. But there has been a little more people looking for at least information in it.
Oh, that's good to hear. And what does a victim encounter when they come into court, when the abuser has been charged?
So it's when an abuser has been charged with a crime, the victim will do the same process. If they're looking for a restraining order, we'll get those paperwork for them. We'll get them to talk to the judge, either by a conference line or Zoom. So that way they don't have to leave the house, where they could be feeling a lot safer than outside. It's very important for us to keep in touch and keep an updated contact information for the victim in order to provide them with updates regarding the case, or if anything changes, or we can email them now restraining orders instead of mailing them or having them to pick up
that's good.
in the courthouse. Yes. Right. So it's very, everything is very for their safety, and to make sure that they feel safe throughout the entire court process.
Thank you, Sylvia. I'm going to switch to Lisa. Lisa? Is Lisa on?
Hi, how are you?
Okay. Part of your model is a high-risk assessment team. What does that mean, and how does it work during COVID? What's a high-risk assessment team?
So there are lots of high-risk assessment teams nationwide, but the high-risk team model that we use is a county-wide high-risk team, which is nice because we end up with people from lots of different disciplines and lots of different jurisdictions taking a look at a case where we think that somebody might benefit from some additional services. And we meet once a month in Norfolk County, and we have people from the DA's office, from police departments, from victim advocates, from different kinds of service provider agencies. We have people who do treatment with batterers. We have parole, probation. It's very wide ranging. And so this team, this multidisciplinary team, can look at a case and sort of analyze it, not in the middle of a crisis, which is always nice, but in a more thoughtful manner, and try and come up with some strategies that may enhance the safety of the victim or of the family. And that's something that we had to change a little bit
Why?
because of COVID. So it's always been really nice to have the time to sit down face to face and meet with people on a monthly basis. And I think we all enjoy that face to face interaction, but obviously that's not safe right now. And we were a little nervous about it, but we knew that we had to continue the work. Even though I don't think when we moved to doing virtual meetings like this, we could have anticipated it would have gone on this long.
Oh, that's for sure.
But it's actually working out quite nicely. And so now we're still able to do the work that we do. We're lucky because we have a grant under the Violence Against Women's Act that provides us with some administrative support. And our coordinator, Megan Cronin, is phenomenal. And so she's come up with a system that allows everybody to have the information that they need ahead of time so we can have productive meetings. So we're very pleased to do the meetings on WebEx and to continue the work.
Lisa, how is go ahead, District Attorney, sorry.
Just listening to Sylvia and Elisa, I just wanted to point out that the court system is a little slow and a little backwards. The technology is less than desirable. I'll leave it at that.
Yep.
So the people like Jen and Sylvia and Lisa and the IT people here, just like Corbin and your end, to makes this work. Well, and we started out, we didn't miss much. When we started out earlier, we said, how are we going to get people restraining orders? What are we going to do? The courthouse are closed. And right away, people going to the police station. And the police stations were, in your case, it's next to the courthouse, but people were showing up at police stations. And that's where we were like the point of contact. And we had judges available, then we had advocates available, and then we started conference calls, then we've gone to Zoom type meetings, and now there's people just coming into the court building. So we really didn't miss much. And then as Lisa said, we didn't want to abandon the high risk meeting. So we figured a way to work around that. And it may not be the most ideal, but it's really the most practical solution that we're exercising so we continue to move down the road and protect people. So I just, we can make this work. I think, as you know, just it's going to be a changing way people are going to be doing business probably for the next 6 to 9 months to a year. And I think you see even like Boston, it's kind of emptied out. People have found ways to get business done without going to the office. So
right.
So we're going to survive, but we still got to focus on protecting people because that's been a challenge.
DA, how have the COVID lockdowns impacted domestic violence? In other words, in the jails, in the prisons, have you seen a difference in release? Should there be releases due to COVID in your opinion? How is this impacting the batterers, so to speak? Well,
first of all, our biggest fear has been that when everybody was really locked down, then everybody knew where the victim was. There's a lot of the shelters and some of the options that we had were drying up a little. So the people like Sylvia and some of our partners had to be a little bit more creative in trying to find shelter alternatives and safety plans. That's presented a unique challenge. Then you have the really bad cases where someone actually does get locked up, and we were under some pressures and some tension, especially by CPCS and the ACLU, that our population in Norfolk County, the House of Correction is the maximum population is 620. When we started March 2nd, the House of Correction had 478 people in the House of Correction, and on June 2nd we were down to 302. So there was a lot of people that either finished sentences or that were released, that we either worked to get out. The whole idea was to try to make the House of Correction a safe place to be with the protocol. So we had to entrust, some of that to the sheriff's people. But some people get out, and that was a question. Lisa and some of the people who worked with her had to examine every case. That was one of the fights we had with CPCS. They were looking for someone to wave a magic wand and let everybody out. You can't do that. You have to examine cases on a case-by-case basis, because there are some bad people who could do bad things to people, and some who deserve to be held pending trial. Now, that's another whole issue. We don't have time for talking about trials today.
That's part two, District Attorney. That's part two.
So Lisa's people had their hands full in some motions, and I'm not going to tell you that we won every motion. We did work with some people to get people out of the houses of correction, because we thought single bunking was better than double and triple bunking, and trying to protect the defendants do have rights too, and trying to keep them safe was important. But our primary goal has always been to protect the victims. So it's one of those things. If people cooperate and use common sense, and I think we do a lot of that in Norfolk County, which is why people like to practice law here. We have good judges, good courts, pretty decent defense counsel, and probation departments. So some are better than others, Susan. I just leave it there. They say some of my DAs are better than others, but we work hard at it, and we do a good job. So
a very good job.
We're all working. We're all working
Jen,
together.
welcome. Can I ask you a question? How have the courts had to adjust, and have they adjusted? Not just Brookline, but throughout the county. Have the courts adjusted to being courts during COVID?
Yes, so they definitely have had to adjust. I mean, right away, we had to adjust how we contacted victims, and so the courts for restraining orders, and everything went right over the phone. Whereas before, we were so used to everyone just showing up to the courthouse. And I think before COVID, it was hard to get people on the phone because people were working and, going amongst their lives. Whereas now, with COVID, everyone was answering the phone. We were having a lot more phone contact with people, which was great. People were always answering the phone. And then we had to continue our teamwork between the courts, the police departments, the community agencies. I mean, I found myself on the phone with one or all of them almost every day, trying to figure out, what are we going to do? How are we going to go about this? Brookline, we were lucky enough to have Doreen, which we mentioned earlier, the civilian domestic violence advocate in the police department. In most of Norfolk County, we have Dove as well. And they quickly jumped on board to give us their cell phone numbers to give to victims, which was a huge help instead of giving out a hotline number. So it really became more teamwork than ever.
And it continues to be teamwork,
yes,
correct?
Exactly.
But have all the courts adjusted? The DA mentioned that maybe their technology is not quite what the DA's office technology is, or what Corbin can do. So have you seen any glitches? Because I have, as a defense attorney, and it's sort of made me a little bit shy to get on the phone, and then I'm in bankruptcy court when I'm supposed to be in criminal court. Anyway.
Yes. Of course. I mean, I had glitches this morning trying to get on the Wi-Fi. So I think everyone's having that uphill, downhill battle. And I think victims are getting frustrated with it too. But also, I think they're finding it helpful to be able to call in. I mean, right now they're going to more in person. So hopefully, we're over that battle of having victims call in and figure out how to call in. But I know a lot of courts very quickly went to emailing. The clerks went to emailing directly with victims, and they set up a generic email, and then also were giving out direct emails. So I think that was extremely helpful, but definitely frustrating in the beginning.
In the beginning. DA Morrissey, your office has a history of being the leader in dealing with domestic violence. In fact, in the 80s, it was featured on 60 Minutes. Would you like to talk about how you continue being first, I think, in the state on domestic violence?
Well, I think just the general continued emphasis we have in the office with the Family Violence Special Victims Unit, having someone of Lisa's caliber, and she has a team of people. We have specially trained domestic violence advocates, spread out throughout the county and the probate court. I think all those things are very important and help us out. I also believe that we spend a lot of time analyzing a case on a case-by-case basis. We will still move ahead on some cases. We think it's important to have the victim on board with us, And that's not always the case, as you know, and having representatives. And sometimes that makes our job easier, and sometimes that makes our job harder. But when they're analyzing cases, they obviously weigh the wishes of the victim. I think some people would tell you that we're a little slow in how we move through the process in handling domestic violence cases, and some of that I would tell you is intentional in the sense we want to make sure people are safe. We don't want to rush anything, because sometimes you have that initial incident that triggers an event in the court, and then there's a little euphoria or a little period of time that things may be okay, and then it's kind of it can be a up and down roadway. And I think we take my former first assistant, Jean Marie Carroll, once warned me when I came in to the office that some of the most dangerous cases that I'm going to have to see and deal with often involve family matters and domestic violence. And I think that was good advice. And that's something that I think we all believe that we have to be very cautious with these cases. So we spend the time. And I know we talked a little bit about the Norfolk Advocates for Children and some of the work we've done.
Yes.
Dealing, and I'll probably let Lisa do that, because she actually is part of the plan to put it together, and she uses it every day. But we have a lot more tools available to us as well. And we continue to maintain those relationships, like with people like Doreen and the police department in Brookline. And that's true of you heard Jen say her partners in the police department, that
Right.
they truly are, not everybody's fortunate enough to have a Doreen in this world. We think that makes a difference, how we do business in Brookline. And it's just one of those models that if there was more time and money, people would be doing some of the same thing. We see that people mental health. I mean, Brookline, Quincy has a mental health person, and also Weymouth, I think Braintree. There's one in Franklin. So we're doing some good things to get services out to people. But at the end of the day, we still may have to prosecute these cases. And I think that's one of the things we keep that goal in mind. It's not always the answer. Getting the right answers is important, but there are some people who do bad things that get prosecuted. So.
Yeah, I have and this is not a planned question, but it's something that's very important to me because I do defend batterers, as you know. Do you think the services for batterers are sufficient? And what would you suggest we add to sort of get batterers away from battering?
Well, I mean, I guess the question is, are there enough services for victims and batterers? I mean,
Right.
Both sides of it, I think could probably use some more help, assistance, and counseling. I mean, obviously recognizing the problem. A lot of times, and this is anecdotal, and maybe Lisa can help me out a little, but I think sometimes people have, and we see a lot of people with underlying, they may be a batterer, but what else is going on in their life? They may have a substance abuse issue. They may have an alcohol or drug problem. They may have a mental health issue. So that's one of the reasons why, we have a session in Quincy, a domestic violence session. We actually have 3 specialty courts in Norfolk County. We have a drug court, we have a mental health court, and what's the third one? A veterans court. We're the first veterans court.
Yeah, terrific.
And so those types of specialty courts allow us to really treat the whole person, and those are really focused on the the defendant, not necessarily sure the victims get services, but those courts actually are more defendant oriented, and we have a high success rate with people not committing the same crime again. So the question is, I mean, could we do a little bit more in that area? I think possibly. Like everything else, I'm afraid with what's going on in the budget these days, that we're waiting for the other shoe to drop, is going to just make things a little bit more complicated. And
I found the DA's office very fair in looking at the whole picture, not just the victims, but also taking into account the defendants. That very fair. It's unbelievable. And of all the counties in the Commonwealth, the fairness aspect of your office is tops. You don't just cast away somebody because they may have a case. You listen to the attorney, you take into account, and then you do what you have to do, which is fair. That's all we can ask.
Well, I gotta say, I don't necessarily do that work on the ground every day, but it's something that that philosophy is what I subscribe to. And I'm very fortunate that I have some very talented people that actually also have the same beliefs. So, I know maybe Lisa has a thought on it.
Lisa, what do you think?
I think that a couple people have already touched upon the need for time. And so when you take the time to examine cases on a case-by-case basis and to speak with everybody who's involved and really get a sense, not just on one date, but on multiple dates over time of what are the factors in each case, then it's great when we have the ability to put in place lots of different services. And sometimes incarceration is a part of that, but many times it's not. And the courts that the DA was talking about, our specialty courts, really are more able to provide wraparound services, which should be the goal. And I think it's something that we're talking about nationally and in Massachusetts about really, excuse me, needing to have better services. And this is something the DA talks about all the time, about when people are released, when people are in the community, what are their supports? And that, to be blunt, is lacking in Massachusetts, and would make our job easier if we had tools to provide to everybody, and if we were able to tailor them a little bit more specifically. I think it would make everybody safer.
Good. I agree. Absolutely, I agree. Last question. In addition to professionals in the field, how can people who are watching the show, citizens, people who have been involved in domestic violence, how can they help the DA's office? How can they help during October Domestic Violence Awareness Month? What suggestions do you have?
We have a couple for you. It's really, well, we're focused today is domestic violence, but there's also, take the issue of even children at risk, for instance. Kids aren't back to school. And so they're not around the teachers, they're not around the doctors, they're not around those professionals who they have a comfortable relationship, the so-called mandatory reporters. The problems that we're seeing in domestic violence actually spread to other areas, and we're trying to get the word out to people that we just did a training for over 300 people, mandatory reporters, all throughout the county, school officials, nurses, psychologists, police officers, school resource officers. And just to remind them, you may not see the kids in the same capacity that you did, but check on the kids. And some people know, depending on your relationship, Brookline actually is a very dense housing community. And people know sometimes when the neighbors might be in distress or someone could be in trouble. And one of the things that our friends at Jane Doe have reminded us is that if you have a relationship with someone and you have some concern, even I went and had an ear exam, and they asked me if I'm safe. I said, of course I'm safe. I'm the district attorney. I should be safe. but you gotta talk to, you gotta take a look at what's going on around you. And if you see something that is a little bit out of place and you have a decent relationship with that person, reach out to them and at least offer a warm hand, a listening ear, and say, hey, if I can ever be of any assistance, and truly mean it, don't offer any help or assistance if it's not something that you're willing to do. But if under these circumstances, people may need a temporary shelter. They may need to talk some things through with someone. They may not want to come to the court, and they may not want to go see like Dove or Jane Doe right away. So if you're comfortable doing that, that's one of the things that we suggest. Help us all out. I mean, we're all on this planet together. And if we can work together, then we will save someone, and we'll make someone's life better. I think that's the simple thing right now. It's a simple act of kindness to watch out for your fellow man and woman. And the other thing I'm reminded, especially that talking to people at Jane Doe, is there's certain segments of the population that have often been underserved or been afraid to get services. Some of them may be the minority community, the LGBTQ plus community. I mean, they may not be as ready to come forward to admit there's problems and services and need it. We're there to help too. So there are some people who may find themselves in different circumstances that may be more vulnerable than others. So pay attention if you can. Just look around, and if you can offer that help, that ear, that suggestion, point in the right direction, call the district attorney's office, give them the number. Those are things I think we can do to make a difference right now.
Yeah, we would like to put the number on at the end of the show for them to call any one of you, if that's possible. One of the things that happened in my practice is people were so isolated. Phones were taken away. They had no access to asking for help. So somehow they found their way to me. I'm right in the middle of Brookline Village. And I suggested to them, go to the supermarket, go to the cleaners, go to where and talk to them, slip them a note, say, listen, I need help. Would you call and give the address? And I had 4 or 5. I don't even know where I came up with that, but I didn't know what to tell them, to say, stay home and get.
Yeah, no, it's that's a big problem, especially even the elderly. It's who are really more afraid to go out. And as we get older, it's you and I, Susan. So the problem is, those are all good ideas. Some of it is when you're under fire and you're under pressure and things aren't going, maybe, sometimes we just miss the little things that can make a difference. So reminding people like on today's show, and as you said, you have a phone conversation, you gave someone a sound piece of advice, and that may help them on the road to be safe, get help, and
to reach out to you or to the police. Any last minute thoughts from anybody? And DA Morrissey, I'm going to come back to you for closing. Lisa, Jen, Sylvia, anything you want the public to know?
I think that even if you're not thinking about a particular situation or person, we all can always do more to educate ourselves. We've had the benefit of being at home, and DA Morrissey has offered us a lot of training, and we can do that professionally. We can do that personally. There are all kinds of podcasts and books out there right now. So it's a great time to really learn some new ideas.
Great. Jen, anything you'd like to say?
I'd like to say that for the general public to be aware that if past instances have occurred and they haven't called the police, they can still do so. So whether it's going to the local police department and starting there, or starting with our office, and an advocate like myself or Sylvia could direct them in the right direction.
Great. Thank you. Sylvia, any last minute words for Brookline Court?
Yeah, just to stay in contact with us. It's very important for us to stay in contact just for the updates and making them aware of any changes that could happen either on a restraining order or on a criminal case.
Great. And District Attorney Morrissey, your last thoughts?
Well, last thought is that we hope that one of the problems I see is there are people who are defendants, as you said, you have your share of it at times, that we're going to have to deal with the next part of our show is going to be trials. We have to get to the point where we can actually start to deal with the final outcome, trials, because we're filling up the House of Correction, and we have to come to some conclusion for some of these people. You can't just keep locking people up. We have to be able to come to a fair resolution of some of these cases and protect the victims at the same time. So that's the challenge for us going forward.
Are there trials going on now, District Attorney Morrissey, in Norfolk County? I saw a special program by the chief, somebody, not from the SJC, but an administrator. It's tough to get trials going, to get people placed, how many people in a room.
I would say this to you. We were successful in getting the grand jury up and running. And we indicted 5 murders in 3 months and some other complicated cases. We just sat another grand jury in the process this week. So we've had people come in. We have safety protocols. I guess there's a good chance for me to tell the public is that social distancing, masks. We spend a lot of our own resources because the courts are a little bit inept, putting up plexiglass and things. The district attorney's office bought that. Now, as far as getting a trial, we're hoping to the courthouse in Norfolk County. Let's start with it. The newest court, I think, is probably Quincy, which is 1970, and Brookline is 60, 70. We can start with a Superior Court, 1820. So, I mean, we're not really made for trials, and you're talking like a murder trial is going to be probably you're going to need 16 jurors. You're going to need 12 and 4 alternates, and so just trying to do the social distancing and the CDC requirements is going to present some unique challenges. So we're trying to get the courts. We're pushing them along. I mean, you could probably get a jury waive trial right now, and but obviously we're still facing the issue of one of my former compatriots and neighbors in Quincy, John Adams, had a pretty strong view of the world about the right to confrontation. And you and I today on Zoom might not fulfill that need. So a lot of people, you're probably going to have to get into the courtroom during a trial phase to face your accuser, and witnesses will have to be present. So simple trials, jury waive, that's a possibility. We hope to start a 6-man trial in Stoughton on a trial basis in the beginning of December. And I would like to start earlier. I get generally frustrated if having run a law firm for many years, if I operated my law firm like the trial courts run, I would be out of business. I think it served me well in the district attorney's office, but it's frustrating. It's committee after committee after committee making a decision, and lucky I have plenty here to pull out, but it's tough, but we're still, we're plugging away, and we found a way. What do they say? Adapt and overcome. I mean, we're doing a great job with the help of a lot of good people, like the Brookline Police Department and Doreen and others that, on the domestic violence front, that makes our job easier. And our community partners, Jane Doe, Dove, and people like that stepping up. So we're here to help. And
the defense bar will help you too.
They've
we
been
all
pretty
want
good.
The system to work. It's better when it works, not when it's
better when we work together. We get a better
Absolutely.
product.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer, Donelin, Sylvia, Lisa, Beatty, and most of all, DA Morrissey. Thank you so much for taking the time today. This is really, really critical, and I hope you'll come back soon. And if you could put your contact information, maybe Corbin could add it at the end of the taping. Corbin? Thank you all. Be safe.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Be safe.